There's a ton of change going on down in the desert for the Arizona Cardinals. And as we continue our look at the New York Giants 2023 schedule of opponents, we're going to check in with Alex Clancy of On Cardinals as he breaks down some of these changes and expectations. That's coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. My name is Patricia Traina. Welcome in to the podcast, and we are continuing our look at the New York Giants 2023 regular season opponents. Joining me on today's program, we have Alex Clancy. He is the host of Locked On Cardinals, so he's going to tell us everything we need to know about the Arizona Cardinals. Alex, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Pat.
All right, Alex, let's jump right in because a lot of questions, a lot of change for the Arizona Cardinals over the offseason. I know you've been keeping up with everything and going crazy. I think we need to start with the coaching change. What are your initial thoughts about it? How are the Cardinals going to change under Gannon? I mean, what are we looking at here?
Over the last couple of years, I haven't been the fondest of the former head coach in Cliff Kingsbury. I thought that, he was given a job that wasn't necessarily deserved of him after not being the most successful college coach. The tie with him and Kyler Murray made sense, kind of, but he was stunting Kyler Murray's, maturity and growth as a quarterback, in my opinion, because he just wasn't equipped to be able to handle it in an NFL level. I don't say that's a knock against the guy. Really nice guy, good interview, just wasn't the greatest head coach. Now, this was kind of a fusion of anybody but him and somebody who could really just inject some life into this organization that's hasn't won a lot since their inception. And with Jonathan Gannon, the Philadelphia Eagles defense was one of the best units in football, if not the best for a large portion of last season. You could probably add, the caveat that they had potentially the most talent on that side, but save the second half of the Super Bowl, the Philadelphia Eagles defense was one of the most feared units in football last year. And Jonathan Gannon leading it, it seemed like the right move for the Cardinals because they couldn't bring in a big name like Sean Payton. And the Cardinals are a startup right now. And they needed a coach who had never been a head coach before to really steer this ship. And who the hell knows what's going to happen? But I feel like so far, he's been a guy that's endearing. He's kind of a weirdo, and I say that lovingly. He's like a Mike McDaniel. Like, he actually has a personality as an NFL head coach, which is a weird thing. Just overall, I think it was a good choice, even though I wasn't a huge fan of it initially. It's warmed on me.
What about the staff he assembled? Now, has he put together guys that he's worked with before? Has he mixed it up? What do you think of it? And what concerns do you have with especially with the coordinators he might have selected?
Yeah, so Nick Rellis was the linebacker coach from Philly, so he knows him, brought him over as defensive coordinator. They signed Kazir White, off-ball linebacker from Philly last year, so those three are going to kind of, they'll know the defense a bit. Obviously filling in the pieces with the new roster that Gannon and Rellis will be coaching. Drew Petzing from Cleveland last year. I'm what I've framed this as when we're talking about it this offseason as a cabinet with, Jonathan Gannon being the president, but the president doesn't make all the damn decisions. Okay. The cabinet is this just group of very smart people who will make decisions together with one leader. And there's a lot of guys, a lot of the coaches are in positions for the first time. So this is going to be a theme with the big question mark. You said that twice in the intro because you couldn't that's exactly what this is. The Arizona Cardinals are one big question mark. So when you have guys who have been experienced as, ancillary coaches, whether it be linebackers coach, quarterback coach, what have you, kind of putting these guys together, it's an experiment, but they check all the boxes up to this point that would yield them the ability to take the positions that they currently hold.
All right, now let's talk about Kyler Murray because he suffered that knee injury last year. There were some question marks about him, I think, even as he continued on in his career. Where do you see the quarterback situation going?
How much time you got, Patricia? I mean, so I'm going to tell a little story about last year, and this is going to make sense when I bring it full circle. So my biggest fear going into last season was that DeAndre Hopkins and Hollywood Brown would not play meaningful snaps together because DeAndre Hopkins was out the first 6 weeks. Hollywood Brown balls out the first 6 weeks, gets hurt the game before DeAndre Hopkins is set to come back, and then Kyler Murray gets hurt. Nightmare realized. You never really know what those two are like on the field together, and now DeAndre Hopkins isn't part of the Arizona Cardinals. With Kyler Murray this year, new coaching regime, Kyler Murray's going to be out a handful of games. Say they start 1-6 and he comes back in week 8, they win a handful of games. Is it enough to bring him back? What's the evolution test for Kyler Murray this year to solidify the fact that he's the guy for the future? And there's so many things that are going to be predicated, like the result is going to be predicated upon with question marks. So with him, he's been in voluntary minicamp. Sure, that's a part of his contract. He gets bonuses for being at minicamps like that. Kyler Murray needs to show that he is more of the oh my God moment guy that I call it over the course of his time in the NFL than not. He's not the underhanded pick 6 against the Rams in the playoffs. He's the guy that brought the Cardinals back from 3 scores down at halftime against the Raiders in week 2. We don't know who he is yet because, in my opinion, he's won in spite of Cliff Kingsbury, not because of him. So it's a very complicated question to answer because there are so many things outside of his control right now because he's on the shelf that we don't know how much time he's going to have, especially with Caleb Williams and Drake May lurking in the wings come 2024 with the Cardinals seemingly going to have a top 3 pick, at least one of their picks between theirs and Houston's.
So if Murray isn't ready physically to start the season, because the Giants get them, I think, in week 2, who do you anticipate will be the guy under center?
You ask really good questions, Pat. I mean, I know that your fans, your listeners know that. I know that most people in that. Here's the thing. It could be the backup quarterback right now on paper is Colt McCoy. Clayton Tune, 5th-round pick out of Houston, is like, at this point, it's screw it. It's like, who cares? If Clayton Tune is ready to rock, maybe they'll find their next Brock Purdy. I say that somewhat jokingly, but like the most fun conversation to have for us this season, because win-loss is not going to be really the true test of growth with the Cardinals this season because they don't have a very good roster, talent-wise currently, is if Clayton Tune can ball out before Kyler Murray comes back. Chances are Kyler Murray's not going to play for the first handful of weeks. I mean, he tore his ACL, in December? Like, I mean, this isn't like Adrian Peterson territory where it's going to be 6 months, but I mean, it's such a weird, it doesn't matter how much you rehab. A lot of it's kind of out of your control. So even though the Giants, they may not face the Cardinals, may not face Kyler Murray, I think Clayton Tune's going to be he can huck it. You know about Houston quarterbacks. Houston quarterbacks huck it all over the field in college. He played 4 years, and he could potentially come in and just be a starter placeholder until Kyler Murray comes back.
Hey, Giant fans, take your first swing at betting on Major League Baseball at FanDuel and get 10 times the amount of your first bet in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 to spend on betting on everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to hit the first home run. All of that on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you can get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official sports partner of Major League Baseball. There's got to be some redeeming quality about this Cardinals team. I mean, I know it's right now they're kind of tearing it down, rebuilding it. But what is the one redeeming quality that makes you feel good about this team going into 2023?
Oh, that draft. That draft was something. Here's the thing. What Monty Ossenfort did in his first draft, it was like It was in a vacuum, a perfect scenario for the Cardinals. And sure, a lot of this is projection based. All of it is projection based, when it comes to the draft. But what Monty Osborne was able to do, accumulate future draft capital while drafting players who could potentially be 1A at their position. Paris Johnson will move over to left tackle at some point. BJ Ojulari could be an everything guy for the Cardinals, whether it be the pass rush, run stopper, or in coverage. Garrett Williams, Syracuse corner, who got hurt last year, who could be a CB1, like John Gaines could be the center for the future. It is the stories of the young players who are going to have a chance to shine, not out of necessity, which is what Steve Keim has done because he couldn't build out a roster, but because there's going to be no real pressure for them to win football games this year, so they can just learn, grow, and hopefully have the game slow down for them a little bit more quickly than if they were just depth guys at this point trying to get snaps. So that's what giving. Yeah.
I was going to say, you look at what the Giants did last year, that, new coaching staff, pretty much, well, not quite the same, but the Giants, of course, coming off a lot of lean years, and how they were able to surprise people with a 9-7-1 record and a playoff berth. Is the feeling down there in Arizona the same, that, hey, if the Giants could do it, and the Giants aren't the first team to do it, but if the Giants, being the most recent team to do it, we can do it as well? Or realistically, are they just not in the same ballpark?
This is a 24-month plan. Like, say Kyler Murray comes back in week 5 and the Cardinals start, I don't know, 1-4 or 1-3, comes back in week 5 and they rip off some wins. Would you be surprised? No, I firmly believe in Kyler Murray, but the big difference here is the Giants' big players were healthy last year. I mean, Daniel Jones was healthy, and Brian Dable being an offensive coach. I think the fusion of the two with the new coaching staff and Kyler Murray is going to be a little bit different, but I see between now and what they've stacked for 2024, young players now, Kyler Murray coming back healthy. I mean, they could – next year is the year, but if they win – I'm not rooting for them to win 2 games and get the first overall pick. We have no idea what those quarterbacks are going to be like. See what you have here, build from within, and see how you can position yourself for not only success for 2023, but for the next 5-7 years.
We're speaking with Alex Clancy. He is the host of On Cardinals, and we're previewing the Arizona Cardinals, whom the New York Giants face in week 2. Alex, I know it's early. Everybody's at their 90-man roster limits right now, so we don't know exactly what the 53-man roster is going to look like. But if you had to do some projections, how did the Cardinals match up against the Giants? What you know of the Giants? Where's the strength? Where's the weakness? Where do you think the game will be won for the Cardinals, and where do you think it'll be lost?
The Cardinals' defense isn't very good. So with what we've seen, and this is by design. They let Byron Murphy walk, they let Zach Allen walk, J.J. Watt retired. Marcus Golden went elsewhere. They don't have a pass rush, at least on paper. So the Cardinals are going to struggle to stop dynamic players. And the Giants have slowly built this dynamic offense with Daniel Jones, et cetera. I'm a huge fan of Daniel Jones. I am. And he terrifies me because Daniel Jones, the Manning comps, obviously we get him from the West Coast too. Save that 80-yard run where he stumbled over his feet at the 5-yard line. The dude has every, tool in the toolbox. He's just so frustratingly inconsistent at times. He could be great. And I know that. And I know that, the Cardinals could win this game if there's 50 plus points scored. There's no way if it's 50 or less that the Cardinals win this game. And again, I know it's early. There's so many things that could happen until then. But the Cardinals are going to need to score a lot of points. And that's why I was talking about if Kyler Murray came back early, they'd have a better chance of winning, a handful of games this year, 5, 6, 7, something like that. Because the Jets won 7 games last year, didn't they? There's no rhyme or reason in the NFL sometimes. But for the Cardinals to win early, it's going to have to be on the offensive side of the ball. It's because the defense is going to be a very, very clunky work in progress early. And if Jonathan Gannon and Nick Morales can take over that, the young guys can step up. It can be different towards the middle and later parts of the season. But early on, it's going to have to be the offense that carries the load.
Okay, so if it's going to happen through the offense, how do you, anticipate the philosophies on offense changing from the Kingsbury era?
more consistency in play calling. When you have a game plan and it doesn't seem to be working, change it. And that's not something that it sounds like I'm digging up. These are just facts. And I'm just the regurgitator of facts from what we've seen over the last handful of years. When it comes to this coaching staff, I trust Drew Petzing. I trust Jonathan Gannon, who's a defensive guy. I trust this core more than I trusted Cliff Kingsbury, who's calling the plays, being the head coach, etc., where you've got a guy like James Conner. You've got Zach Ertz, who's coming back from ACL tear, but you've got Trey McBride. The Cardinals, when healthy, their skill position players are top 15, even without Kyler Murray. I mean, Hollywood Brown's fine. Rondale Moore when he's healthy. Greg Dortch. They've got players, but the offense for me is going to run through the running game with James Conner. It should have. It was when they started 10-2, and that's the best way to kind of placate the masses without a quarterback, without your star quarterback, control the clock. And I think that run first, open everything else up, regardless of who the quarterback is, would be the best recipe for the Cardinals. And I feel like if it doesn't work, they'll fix it and they'll change it. Not necessarily what happened over the last 4 years with the head coach they currently had. They formerly had.
What about the receiving targets? I mean, who's the guy that maybe the Giants will want to focus on to shut down?
I wish it was still DeAndre Hopkins, Pat.
Yeah.
I wish we could have that conversation. It'll be Hollywood Brown, just de facto. The interesting wrinkle here is the Cardinals' top 3 receivers right now, save Michael Wilson, the rookie out of Stanford, they're all under 5'10". So I call them the Teslas because they're 0 to 60 in 2.5 flat. They are 3 of the fastest receivers in the NFL. They're all in the Arizona Cardinals. Rondale Moore, when he's healthy, when he's in space, there are very few players in the NFL who have the gazelle-like, just fluidity in space. I mean, Lamar Jackson, there are a couple other guys. When they're in space, they're extremely fun to watch. And Rondale Moore is one of them. But it's going to be Hollywood Brown until it isn't. And he's in a contract year. So we'll see what happens with Kyler Murray, not playing the majority of the season. I think that they're probably, especially early on, they're going to try and force feed him and really see if he's the wide receiver 1 for the future for the Cardinals.
And of course, games are often won and lost in the pit. Tell us about the offensive line for the Cardinals and the defensive line for that matter, and how do you think they might stack up against the Giants?
The defensive line is going to be the weakest part of this roster. And this was all, again, the Cardinals can't rebuild their roster in one offseason. They kind of punted during free agency. In the draft, they focused elsewhere. They have a bevy of picks for 2024, and I'm sure that they're going to pay attention to that defensive line more next season. But the offensive line is the interesting one because the line that I've said ever since Kyler Murray was drafted is if Kyler Murray is not protected, none of this is going to work. And you can say that about any quarterback, whoever the quarterback is at the time. DJ Humphries on the left side has been fine. He was the last offensive lineman Steve Keim drafted in the first round since 2015 before, Paris Johnson Jr. was drafted by Monty Ossenfort. Paris Johnson's going to play left guard, we think. Kelvin Beachum on the right side, he was one of the better offseason signings, low risk contractually against the cap. He's been fine on the right side. And John Gaines is the story. John Gaines was drafted in the 4th round out of UCLA. For those who are fantasy football fans, for those who love college running backs, Zach Charbonnet from UCLA, who's now with Seattle, ran behind John Gaines. Zach Charbonnet was one of the best running backs in football last year. And John Gaines has been lining up at center for the Cardinals, losing Rodney Hudson, not having anywhere to turn when he got hurt last season and the season before, has been a huge crater in the offensive line for the Cardinals because they aren't able to build pocket depth if you don't have a damn center who can chip and who can take care of their blocking responsibilities. And John Gaines has wowed people in voluntary minicamp. He's going to be a guy to watch where if he can plug in and play center, he played all over the offensive line in college, and they don't have to go sign a higher end center come next season or draft one in the first couple rounds. That's going to be a massive shift for the Cardinals because, again, say it with me, friends, if the offensive line sucks, nothing works.
So obviously the offensive line won't be a key matchup in this game, but Alex, final question for you. When
Yeah.
you look at the New York Giants, what you know of the New York Giants, what particular player or unit really like scares you?
Well, the thing with the Giants and when they play the Cardinals is, well, obviously with Saquon, it's fun for me to just watch it from afar because I love Saquon Barkley. I think he's great. I loved him in Penn State. Obviously, everybody you talk to says the same exact thing about him, I'm sure. Week 2, it's the Saquon show. Right? I mean, like it's because of when they play. And Saquon Barkley could have a career game against the Cardinals. Like with how things are constructed early on in the season, with this being a big year for him, and whatever they're going to do with him, I'm assuming they're not going to extend him. And obviously that's Locked On Giants, your team every day. That's it. That's it. Like the running backs that have beat up the Cardinals over the last couple of years, a lot more inferior than Saquon Barkley. And when you have a guy like that, it's just like any play could be the next one where he drops a 75-yard, 2 cuts and he's gone, run, or a screen pass to the house, whatever it may be. That's the thing that is going to have Cardinals fans, media members, and players in tremors, with synchronicity come week 2. It's because it starts and ends with Saquon Barkley.
Keeping it real here, huh? I mean, I love it. You've just been so blunt and honest about the Cardinals. And that's what's so great about our Locked On host, folks. We give it to you straight. We're not homers. We'll tell it the way it is. He is Alex Clancy, host of Locked On Cardinals. We will see him again the Thursday before for Crossover Thursday when we have a better idea of the rosters, who's playing, how things are starting to look. Alex, thank you so much for coming on with me. I really appreciate it. And we'll talk again down the line.